This week in racing, we're going to be talking about Formula One invading Vietnam. We're also going to be talking about NASCAR and its silly season. It's really heated up in the last couple days. Speaking of silly and NASCAR, let's talk about Kevin Harvick's encumbered win and the subsequent penalty that came away from it, taking him out of the Final Four at Homestead, at least at the moment. We're also going to talk about Tony Stewart and his continued teasing of a potential Indy 500 run and the teams that may surprise you that have offered him a ride in next year's Indianapolis 500. So we're going to start out talking about Formula One in Vietnam. It was officially announced this week, and it's actually fairly surprising, even though there were some rumors and talk about it, that this is actually happening. It's going to be a very interesting circuit, as you can see. There are certainly some elements from the proposed Miami track in there, as well as a lot of people making comparisons to Baku because of the fact that this is a temporary street circuit. There's not a whole lot for me to talk about here. Obviously, it's a long way off before the Vietnam Grand Prix actually takes place, but this circuit, the way it's looking like it's going to turn out, is going to be one of those compromised tracks. There's certainly one sector that's going to favor the cars with a lot of horsepower or that are light on drag, and then certainly you've got the second half of the course, which is very much in favor of a car like, if this race were to take place this year, a Red Bull, where you've got a lot of downforce, a lot of grip. It could produce a very interesting race. I know a lot of people were particularly not very excited about Baku. That turned out to be has turned out to be one of the most exciting Grand Prix in the year. So this could be fun. We'll have to wait and see. Hopefully Haas F1 doesn't get booed too much. Continuing on, we're going to talk about the NASCAR silly season because there were some pretty major announcements that came out this week. First of all, we'll start off talking about the Xfinity Series as Austin Cindric has been signed full-time to drive the Penske number 22. And in addition to that, we've got another full-time Xfinity-only driver to announce, and it's Ross Chastain, who has impressed mightily in the Ganassi Racing car in limited runs this year. He's got a full season in Xfinity next year to prove his talents. And of course, perhaps the biggest news, despite the fact that it's the most well-known, is that Martin Truex Jr. has been confirmed to the number 19 Joe Gibbs Racing Toyota. I think pretty much everybody saw this coming. Cole Pern, his crew chief as well, has been confirmed. So we've pretty much got a super team at Joe Gibbs Racing. And certainly, I guess we'll talk about Truex first, since I think back in July or August, whenever I made the first video talking about Furniture Row shutting down, I think most people jumped to the correct conclusion that Joe Gibbs Racing was going to pick up Truex and Pern, and this is how it's transpired, exactly as kind of the pundits predicted. And yeah, again, I mentioned super team. I think this is a super team. I mean, you look at this team, there's not a weak link on it. Eric Jones in particular, I think some people might point and say, well, he's not quite there yet. This was a rookie season. He won in his rookie season. He's looked impressive at times, and certainly bringing another experienced championship caliber driver into that team, I think will help Jones more than hurt him. Daniel Suarez, we still don't know where he's going. Many people are speculating that he is going to go to the 41 car and actually take Eris, the sponsor, with him, which is fairly interesting. Now, talking about Xfinity, I think a lot of people were upset to see that Cindric was signed full-time, and I'm going to question why. To me, I understand that Cindric's a rich kid. Cindric's in with the family at Penske Racing. He's the son of the head honcho there, the second in command, the Darth Vader to Roger Penske's Emperor, Tim Cindric. But the way I see it is Austin Cindric worse than the revolving door of cup drivers that everybody has complained about for the last 15 years in the Xfinity Series? I would say no. I think this is an improvement here. If Penske's going to want to run cup drivers, they're going to do it in the 12 car, which isn't going to be a full-time car anyway. I mean, I don't see what the problem is here. I want to see a Penske car going for the Drivers' Championship in the Xfinity Series. We haven't seen that, I think, since they banned the Cup drivers from taking championship points. So that should be very exciting. Ditto for Ross Chastain. Props to Ganassi Racing, recognizing talent, recognizing when they've got somebody that they should keep in their stable. And you've got to think, with the number one car becoming somewhat available for next year, as we, I think, are aware, it's pretty much going to be Kurt Busch in that car for next season. But Kurt Busch is getting up there in age. How much longer, or how long of a contract is he going to sign with Ganassi? Ross Chastain looks like a driver with a lot of talent potential, and if Ganassi can keep Kyle Larson under their payroll going into the future, Larson and Chastain, that's one heck of a 1-2 punch if you ever asked me. So I think this is good things. I think especially in the Xfinity Series, you've got two full-timers with two big teams. That is a good sign. I really do think it is. And now we get to talk about the major controversy of this week. Kevin Harvick had his win at Texas Motor Speedway encumbered, which means despite the fact that he gets to keep the trophy, he doesn't get to keep much of else from this race. He's no longer locked into Homestead. That win does not count as a Homestead eligible win. He's lost 40 points, which without the win also eliminates him from the championship four at the moment. His crew chief and car chief have also been suspended for the season. Now, why was this win encumbered? Well, NASCAR wasn't particularly interested in letting that information out. We eventually learned that it was an issue with the rear spoiler. It was slightly, I think it was a few millimeters out of line, and that NASCAR deemed, after taking the car back to the R&D center and tearing it apart, was an advantage over the other cars, an unfair advantage over the other cars. Now, what's interesting about this, and something that a lot of people have pointed out, is that the car passed the morning technical inspection, and between that time and the time the car rolled out onto the racetrack, the car became illegal. And once the race was over, NASCAR determined that they needed to tear the car down at the R&D center to find out how did Kevin Harvick keep that low line out of 1 and 2. Nobody else was able to do that. Certainly Ryan Blaney, who was battling for the win, wasn't able to do that. I guess that ticks some boxes in NASCAR's brains there, thinking, whoa, what's going on here? And they discovered that the car was out of spec. Now, there's a lot to think about here, and I think first and foremost, I think I let you guys know what the real problem is here. I think NASCAR, its system is way too complicated, and it's almost too much of a nanny state, I guess you could say. They're so concerned with inspecting the cars at so many different points that I think they miss out on opportunities to simplify things here. It should never get to the point, and NASCAR, actually Bill France himself was kind of integral in this thought process. The car that crosses the finish line, there should never be a question that car is the rightful winner of the race. Ever. Especially in NASCAR, where things generally work better when they're simple. So the fact that a car can pass morning technical inspection and go and roll off onto the racetrack, run the full 500-mile race, win it, and then be determined to be illegal, I think there's a big problem there. And I think the problem exists in the fact that the morning technical inspection, the technical inspection prior to the race, is not treated as law. And so that to say anyway is to say that is for me to say I think the solution here is pretty simple. I think if NASCAR wants to continue on their particular road here, I think they need, after the morning technical inspection, I think they need to impound the cars. A NASCAR official should be the one that rolls the car out to the starting grid, and no team member should be allowed to touch the car after it has gone through tech. Until the driver climbs in and gentlemen start your engines, nobody can touch that race car. And if there's an infraction during the race, surely NASCAR officials would be able to catch team members messing with the car to make it illegally faster throughout the race on pit road, and then would give them a penalty that would would at least nullify any advantage that they would gain through nefarious measures. So that's my personal solution to this problem. I think it's the most simple way to do it at the moment without, say, expanding the rule book or laxing or reducing the rule book, so to speak, so that teams can do more stuff to make their cars more different than the other ones. But I think this is the way they're going to have to do it. I think they really do need to treat or at least put emphasis on the morning technical inspection. And if you're so worried about cheating, because I think this is what happened, it really does seem, because there's a point where the car was legal, and then it became illegal prior to rolling out and going into the race. So there's a problem, a big problem right there. And especially according to NASCAR's rules, why is there a situation where teams can mess with the cars and bring them out of the rules? And then, and there's a potential here. Imagine, it's a very unlikely situation, and I don't even think NASCAR would do this. They'd probably just fine them, despite what their rule book says. But there's a potential that the Homestead winner could become encumbered, and the champion that's crowned at Homestead may not actually be the champion. It's a possibility. So NASCAR really does need to crack down on this to prevent it from happening again, because it creates confusion, it creates angst, not only with the competitors but also with the fans. Again, it sets a bad precedence as well, because you're essentially saying, hey, if you're too good, we're going to suspect something, we're going to tear your car down, and we're going to find something that you were cheating or you pushed the rule book too far, and we're going to take we're not going to take your win away, but we're going to take everything associated with your win away. It's a dangerous precedent to set. It's not good for the sport, and again, I hope it changes. And finally, Tony Stewart continues to talk about the Indianapolis 500 and the potential of him coming to the race as early as next year to take another shot at it. He hasn't raced at Indianapolis since 2001 when he drove for Chip Ganassi Racing, but he sat down to an interview with Kyle Petty this week, and he had a very interesting thing to say. Roll the clip.
Offers from Ray Hall and Zach Brown from the McLaren side, Michael Andretti from Penske. I think Ganassi would still want me in a car if I still wanted to go. He hasn't said anything officially, but I mean, I've got really good offers to go run Indy next year.
So, where do we begin to unpack this one? I guess we'll start with the meme, McLaren. Who hasn't McLaren talked to? And they're not coming. They said, months ago, we're not coming, but we talked to Scott Dixon, Tony Stewart, and Fernando Alonso. But, I mean, three of the greatest in their own discipline of all time. And McLaren was willing, at least at one point, to sign at least one of the three of them, possibly all three of them, to race at the Indianapolis 500. Zach Brown, you maniac. Regardless. Okay, so, and it wasn't only that team. If you look at the teams he mentioned by name as a confirmed proposal from Tony Stewart to Indy 500 is Ray Hall, Andretti, Penske, McLaren. He also mentioned Ganassi, but he hasn't had a formal invitation from them. But you look at those teams, what teams are always running up at the front at the Indy 500? What teams have potential to win? Those teams. So Tony Stewart has literally the best equipment and his choice of the best equipment at his feet. So if he's not going to do this, I mean, he's got everything he could possibly want to do the Indy 500, and at his fingertips. So that seems to lend credence to a lot of people that would say, yeah, Tony Stewart's not coming. When you've got offers from Roger Penske, Michael Andretti, and Zach Brown all on the table, you think you would go for the Indy 500, even if, as Tony Stewart has said, he doesn't think he could win it in the first year. He thinks he could easily qualify, and I certainly agree with him on that particular point. And he also doesn't want to be a sideshow, as we've heard. But I think something very important to consider here is the fact that Tony Stewart is talking about this as a serious issue at all. There was a time prior to this year where Tony Stewart said, well, I'm too old. I'm washed up. I don't want to be a sideshow. He says all these things. He said all these things prior to this year, and then suddenly something changed this year. And it's funny. I actually have a personal observation of Tony Stewart's attitude toward the Indy 500. I was at a motorsports show in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, earlier this winter, or last winter, this winter, I guess you could say, January. And I had a little diecast car of his Glidden Menard car. And I asked him to sign it. And one of the questions the first question I asked him was, what was it like to go 237 at Indy? And you could see, because he was kind of in that autograph mode, like, oh God, I'm just here signing autographs. And then suddenly he looks up at me, his face brightens up, his posture completely changes, and then he launches into like a 5-minute description of what it was like to drive at Indianapolis in that era. So he clearly has the fire. He clearly has the passion for the event. And again, if you ever have the opportunity, ask him about the Indy 500. And suddenly you'll just see a Tony Stewart that looks about 20 years younger. And I personally believe, and again, this is from my personal observation of the man himself when I talked to him about the Indy 500, I really do think he's going to do it. Will he do it next year? That's very hard to say. I would lean toward no. But again, like I said in the 40-car prediction video, or the video talking about the entry list for next year's Indy 500, we didn't know at this point last year that Danica Patrick was going to do it, and 2 years ago we didn't know that Fernando Alonso was going to do it. So a lot of these kind of Hollywood-style stars coming in, usually the deals come together pretty late, and certainly Tony Stewart has been keeping this in the media, and I think that's important because if you're in the media, that means not only us fans and the car owners are looking at it, but potential sponsors are too. Tony Stewart's not dumb. He knows what he's doing to a certain extent. So it'll be interesting to see how this saga ends up playing out. But let's also say, remember, my count right now is at 38 cars. Let's say if Tony Stewart goes to Ganassi, I don't have an extra Ganassi car on that count of 38 at the moment. That's an extra car. We're getting up to 39. If that Dragon Speed thing everybody was telling me about in the comments happens, there's 40. So, I don't know. If Tony Stewart shows up at Indy this year, that will not only be a blockbuster, even bigger than the potential of Fernando Alonso also being on the grid at the same time. Imagine that one. This could be very exciting. So, we'll just have to continue watching this story unfold as things go on. So thank you guys so much for watching This Week in Racing. Those of you who always complain about not being enough about NASCAR, this was a very NASCAR heavy episode, so I hope you've enjoyed it. And be sure to subscribe for more motorsport, IndyCar, Formula One, NASCAR, and I guess Smoke Watch content. We'll see you in the next video.